Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We are awaiting the start of Day 10 for the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. You know her as the Doomsday cult mom. The 49-year-old is charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and other counts in connection with the deaths of her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee Ryan, her adopted son, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow, and her husband, Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, yesterday, there was a lot of testimony involving the defendant and her husband's cell phones and a lot of forensic data we want to get into. So who better to bring in to talk about the specifics of this case than our very own Gigi McKelvey, who is inside that courthouse, and she is outside the Ada County Courthouse right now live for us. Good morning, Gigi. Good to see you on what appears to be just, another cold day.
Good morning, Jesse. Yeah, it's cold here in Boise. We got a warm-up coming, thank goodness.
Well, okay, let's get into it. And you know where I want to start. The first witness was Detective David Stubbs. He was on the stand Thursday before they broke for the weekend. And the real big takeaway, you tell me if I'm wrong, was the burner phones. Talk to us about what we learned about burner phones in this case.
Yeah, they had a ton of burner phones. I don't know how they kept up with what
You mean
phone
Chad and
with
Lori?
who.
You mean Chad and Lori?
All of them, Chad, Lori, and Alex, have burner phones, and there were over 30 burner phones, I believe, that they've looked into for this case. Here's the thing. They get the burner phones to try to hide their actions, but then you have somebody like Alex who's logging into his Google account and is tracing every step he makes. Not smart criminals, but they found, I think, 10 electronic devices in the car in Hawaii when they executed that search warrant. They had electronics all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, the mere fact of having so many phones is questionable, to say in and of itself. Now, you and I were talking about something about geofencing. And geofencing is a very important term that came up yesterday to determine the device's location on specific property. What did we learn about geofencing yesterday?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've heard of it before, but it was explained really well yesterday in court by the witness. So essentially, they put a bubble around Chad's property digitally, and then they put a bubble around the townhomes, and they see which phones were traveling from point A to point B between those bubbles, from my understanding, just to see if anybody else happened to have been involved or there that day that the children were buried on Chad's property. It's really cool how that works. And by the way, if you're going to commit a crime, leave your phone at home and ride a horse.
Well,
That's what I've learned.
Well, there you go, a tip of the day. But it seems to me that it's Alex Cox, right? The digital evidence is suggesting Alex Cox was the one that went onto Chad's property and buried the bodies. Is that what we took? Was that the takeaway from yesterday?
It really was, although we know Chad was a professional grave digger, and the photos that we saw the first week of the grave where JJ was found was very much fitted for his body. So the theory everybody has is that was pre-dug. He was only on that property 17 minutes, to where with Tylee, he was there for over 2 hours. Now, we know she had to be dismembered somewhere, and that's part of what's coming up in testimony at some point is the DNA found on a pickaxe and a shovel. But it looks like, as far as the group, Chad and Alex were the only two on the property the day both kids were buried.
And look, we know that Lori Vallow Daybell's team is putting the alibi defense. She wasn't there, so she wasn't a part of it. Then again, we all know that she could be convicted of conspiracy and murder without even being present at the crime scene. Okay, now we also learned about Google searches. So that was interesting because Google searches, in a way, in a lot of the cases that we cover, kind of give you an insight into somebody's thinking. Not all the time, but sometimes. What did we learn about the Google searches from Chad and Lori?
Well, Lori was thinking about getting married, that's for sure, way before even Charles and Tammy both were murdered. In fact, she bought the wedding rings that they used on October 2nd, which Tammy Daybell wasn't murdered until October 19th. That was even before the attempt on her life by who we believe to be Alex Cox in the driveway. And the day of Tammy Daybell's funeral, Lori was Googling wedding dresses, Kauai, which is where they ended up and got married. Chad was searching for Ned Schneider, which was the name of the demon that first possessed Charles, looking up Louisiana obituaries for this person, Ned Schneider. And unfortunately, that was all brought to the attention of the jury yesterday, showing a pattern of them using electronics to kind of further their beliefs and I think to validate their beliefs as well.
Just let's be clear, though, there's not 100%, I mean, we can't 100% say it was Chad or Lori searching these things, can we?
You can't, but it was tied to their Google accounts. So it when they got all of the data back from Google, that was what was underneath each account. I'm surprised that the defense did not bring that up yesterday of, well, it came from her account, but can you say it was actually her? The cross-exam yesterday, especially with a couple of the witnesses, was more of, well, did you research Ned Schneider obituary 1996? No. Why would you not do that? You know, so it seems like they're still kind of going after the witnesses more than they're defending Lori or giving an explanation as to why something is wrong that they testified to. It's been very interesting to watch how the defense is working this case.
Yeah, and I know that John Thomas, one of her attorneys, said on cross, you know, that one thing that wasn't searched was killing your children. So that was a bit curious. I mean, that would have been a real smoking gun if she was looking at that. I did think it was kind of curious that one of the searches connected with Chad was when you surprise someone with accusations, and take that for what you will. Now, what about wedding photos? Didn't the jury see that?
We did. We saw some wedding photos. If you followed this case, a few of those you've seen. We did see a couple we haven't, focusing in on those wedding bands, the malachite wedding bands that Lori bought for the wedding. There was one where he had her scooped up and kissing her, and the famous ukulele picture where Chad's in all white pretending to play a ukulele. And so that was very impactful on the jury. All of this wedding stuff, when the dates are revealed, when these searches happened, and then it's reiterated to the jury. Tammy Daybell was still alive at this point. Very powerful stuff. They tend to look over at Lori when stuff like this is said in court, just to see her reaction, which yesterday she was in a very good mood. By the way, her sister Summer and I believe her uncle attended yesterday, and so she was dressed a little, you could tell she took a little extra care to get ready yesterday and seemed to be in a very good mood.
Was there any interaction between Summer Shiflet and Lori Vallow Daybell?
I couldn't see Summer. I had a great line of sight of Lori. At times, she would look over at her, kind of raise her eyebrow, sort of like, hey, look at me. She definitely was looking for some sort of a validation. I'm not sure if she got it. It will be very interesting once Summer is on the stand and can just turn and look at Lori, whether or not she does. But I've talked to people who met her yesterday, said that she was seen wiping tears at times, and a very, very nice lady, as far as everybody who crossed paths with her yesterday.
Now, the second witness who I think testified was FBI agent Nicole Heidman. We talked about the Google searches. Weren't there text messages between Chad and Lori? What was revealed there?
There were some text messages. A lot of those were, one actually, that I've never seen anything like it from Chad. Apparently, a couple of his kids were graduating from BYUI, and he let her know in a text, like, I really can't see you until this is finished. He had some son-in-laws that were there for these graduations, I believe, and so that was interesting. You never hear Chad say, I can't see you, my lover goddess, or whatever he calls her. But the text messages were really just sort of back and forth things, nothing too scandalous, nothing too revealing, but some of those are to come, I do believe.
But these messages, these love notes, were while he's still married to Tammy. Well, Tammy's still alive.
Right. Yeah, and there were some cringy ones, you know, where I can't wait to see you and I miss you. And we also learned that in some of these phone calls, they were stored, the contacts on the phone were James and Elena, which are the characters that he used in his, I call it an erotic epic fail loin fire story he wrote for her, trying to be all, you know, Mr. Sexy, but yeah, so it's just been a little bit of I love you, I miss you, that kind of thing, just random Daybell texts.
And the jury is paying attention to all of this because, look, when you talk about cell phone tracking and pinging and you know how Google searches work, it can get a little tedious, but you tell me, is the jury paying attention to all of this?
100%. They might need new notebooks here soon. They are writing constantly. I've sat through many trials with this cell phone data. I still cannot grasp how these towers and sectors work, but they were doing their due diligence in writing down pretty much the entire time that he was testifying, just to make sure when they go back to deliberations, they have a little bit better understanding of what was said. This stuff gets lost as the weeks go on and you forget things. So very attentive jury. They're focusing on Lori. They're focusing on the witnesses. I haven't seen anybody lose focus one time. They're very committed to justice in this case, I believe.
Okay, so Gigi, if you were to summarize yesterday, the strongest points for the prosecution, the biggest takeaways to help them prove their case against Lori Vallow Daybell, what would you say from yesterday was the strongest piece of evidence or the strongest pieces of evidence?
Definitely all these searches about wedding dresses, malachite rings, it shows they were planning on Tammy dying imminently, not in the way future, like Chad's visions. She's not going to live to be an old woman, that kind of thing. I think, it reiterates Tammy was in the way. They were getting her out of the way. And not only that, but she had bought the things they used in their wedding before Tammy Daybell was even murdered. Always damaging when that comes out because it shows a pattern.
I think I agree with you, but I also think the Alex Cox that his device was tracking between these locations around the time that the children went missing and putting him on Chad's property. If the jury believes that she directed Alex Cox to do that, or she compelled him to do it, or encouraged him to do this, then you might have a murder conviction right there. And of course, if they're all part of a conspiracy and Alex Cox is doing something in furtherance of that conspiracy, she can be found guilty as well. Now, today, what do we expect today, and what do we expect for the rest of the week?
Well, the witness list is sealed, so we really don't know until somebody's called to the stand who's going to testify. So the gentleman that was on the stand with the cell phone pings yesterday from the FBI, he will be back on direct this morning. Summer Shiflet is here. She is expected to testify for the state. The contents of that testimony, I'm told in part, will be a jailhouse call between Lori and Summer that was very intense, maybe even more intense than the one we heard previously with Colby. So everybody's interested to see what happens on that recording. That's the most anticipated testimony that we are all waiting on at this point.
Gigi McKelvey, excellent reporting as always. I know you have to go back in there to get a good seat, but we really do appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, everybody. So we're going to continue to follow the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. Gigi will be back out later to give us an update on what is happening in that courthouse. In the meantime, that does it for me. Thank you so much. We're going to take a break, but don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we are going to bring you the Letitia Stout stepmom murder trial. We'll be back.